New boot goofing thanks to our friends over at Brunt Workwear. They just recently sent me out a pair to try for myself, and I'm really excited about it. I have to say, I'm very, very impressed. I'm a big boot guy. I've got cowboy boots, I've got mud boots, I've got casual boots, and I've got Carolinas as my go-to steel tip work boots, but we're looking to try something out new. Brunt had actually reached out and offered to send me a set and said, honestly, Jack, just wear them and see what you think. I don't think you're gonna be disappointed. And over the last few days, I've been wearing these things, and I'll tell you guys what, disappointed? I am not. I'm actually very, very satisfied, and I'm super excited to have a brand new set of steeds that are gonna be carrying me through the winter. Comfortable with a composite hard tip toe, and we're ready to go. Now, this is not a sponsored ad. If anything, I'm just giving you guys my full candid experience with them as I'm going through my day, and truthfully, I don't ever tell you guys about anything that I don't believe in, and I really like these boots. For the price, I think you get what you pay for, and it's like these work boots are slippers. My Carolinas are nice, don't get me wrong, I like them, they're worn in, they're comfortable, they're ready to rock and roll, but there's just something different about this style of boot that I'm definitely not dissatisfied with. Alright guys, so over the last few days there have been massive changes to the building, as I was alluding to in some of our previous uploads, and everything is materializing right here before our eyes. So Casey was out the other day and she happened to capture a lot of the work that was going on. So here's a little highlight reel. Day 2 of the week of prep that we're doing to get this building into a completely new category of complete. Once this week is done, we are going to be at 85 to 90% complete. That's just a rough gauge, but we're at the light at the end of the tunnel, and it is so unbelievably exciting. You guys can see we have a new DURTYMAX here to the channel. This is my friend Orland Zimmerman. He's actually out for day 2 helping us with some of our softening and our trim detail. And I'm actually gonna provide his business information if anybody in the area is interested in getting in touch with him for big or small projects. There's his information right there, guys, if you are looking for any projects in the area. This softening looks so good. So it's a little bit difficult to tell with the shadows and the shading of the black, but that's actually exactly the way that I wanted it. And this black and tan theme is coming together better than I could have ever imagined. And the even cooler part is it syncs up with the house beautifully. This building is absolutely gorgeous in every single way, shape, and form. And I have to give huge props to Mike, Orland, my friend Gary, and all the other people that have chipped in to get us to where we're going today. And of course, my lovely wife at the top of the list for supporting these big projects behind the scenes, day in and day out. She actually just reported some bad news. We're gonna get back to the building here in a minute because there's a lot of other changes that I'm excited to show you guys, but we need to go check something out collectively together because she just got back from an appointment and her brand new Rubicon just got hit.
So terrible. I think just the bumper scratch, he was like 100 years old. And then he hit the bike rack. He like backed into my car and then pulled forward and hit the bike rack.
All within the same matter of like one movement. So he literally hit you and then he hit a bike rack in front of you. Yeah. No, that's not gonna come out. This is all plastic. So that would all need to be replaced, that whole piece. Simply just pay for it and get it fixed. Call it a day. It's an old man, he probably shouldn't be driving.
Yeah, but we're all gonna be old someday, and I don't know. I like wanna cry for him because I feel so.
So we had actually picked up these black nails, but man, they're absolute garbage. When we tapped them in, they actually lost all their paint. So we're gonna go back and we're gonna hit those exposed nails with some black touch-up paint. But a majority of what you're seeing, probably ever so slightly there on the edge of the fascia, won't be visible because we have plans for big 6-inch commercial gutters, which are pretty much going to cover up the majority of that 2x8 up there. So I give you guys a better angle, but it just downpoured, and I don't want to get the new Brunt boots completely filthy yet, although they are starting to take on a work style. But our exterior is essentially 100% complete, and that is something that feels absolutely incredible to say, because it felt like things kind of slowed down there in the middle, but we're gearing back up, boys and girls. So that brings us to another thing that we accomplished yesterday, and that was the insulation and preparing for the concrete floor. We're covering massive topics at the speed of light right now, as the change has been so significant in just one day. So let's start right here on the floor. We've got all of our vapor barrier down. That inevitably prevents any moisture from leaching up into the concrete, which still maintains somewhat of a porous nature. That moisture could actually leak up to the top of the concrete and create discoloration and actually moisture pooling. So this vapor barrier acts as a vapor block. Then all around you can see this green rebar. This is rebar, yes, it's just not steel, it's actually fiberglass. They say it's just as good, if not better, and it comes in a little bit of a better price. So we ended up going with a 3-foot on center grid that's laid out oh so beautifully. My mason out here is absolutely killing it, and he's making this stuff look easy. There's your little kudos. I'm not gonna put your ass in this video though. So we're prepping for our big pour this upcoming Thursday. Today is Tuesday, as we're getting everything ready to rock and roll. These stakes are going to be going in the ground to hold what's going to be the form, and this form is set at our final floor height. We jump outside and take a look down. That's where the concrete's gonna cruise across, and it's gonna oh so beautifully match up with the finished recreation space, which I'm super pumped about. This concrete right here is going to make this entire building feel even more complete than it already feels right now, versus Sunday when I was in here and it was essentially just an exoskeleton. Now all of these little stakes right here are grade pins. These tell us right where our finished floor height is, so that way we have reference points all across. You can see they're scattered out in 3, 6, 9, 12-foot increments as a reference point as these guys come in and do what they do best. I'm super excited to film that whole process. I find mason work and concrete work so fascinating, because concrete is just this very basic mixture of cement, stone, sand, and water, and it creates extremely hard surfaces. Now, I do figure it's worth noting that we are going to be doing a 4,000 PSI at roughly 5.5 to 6 inches all across, graded by yours truly. I did a pretty decent job. There are some minor lows and minor highs throughout, but I'd say that we're shooting at 95%. Now, before we get any further with the building update, whoa, we were zoomed in real close there. A lot of you guys were wondering about what I was doing with radiant floor versus other mediums of heating, and I actually decided, after a very torn mindset on this, that I was gonna be opting out of radiant floor. For the cost to benefit ratio, it just didn't make sense to me. We very much could have done it, but there's a lot of other things that I want to do that don't involve this building taking any more from me than it already has. So what we opted into is what's called a radiant tube style heater. It's actually going to suspend up at the back of the building 60 foot from the left to the right side. Left to the right, right to the left. Anyway, you guys get my point. And it's going to be propane fed. It's another very efficient means of heat, and it actually works just like radiant floor, except it heats the objects in the building versus the slab that the heat's within. For those of you that don't know, at this point what we would have done is, prior to putting the rebar down, we would have done a very thick insulation mat like we did over the recreation space there. We would have laid wire mesh down, and then the tubing would have gone on the wire mesh and probably all stubbed up in the recreation space area. But boys, I'll tell you what, I have no regrets, and after talking to a lot of very trusty sources, I am not gonna look back on that decision. I know you guys are still gonna be down in the comments saying, Jack, this is the biggest regret decision of your life, and honestly, if you think that, then learn from my mistake, and when you build your own building, you can do radiant floor. Problem solved. So now that you guys have a general gist of what we're doing for the floor and what's up and coming there, what else looks different? You guys noticing anything? Yes, 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 we've got insulation in. Pardon the banging in the background. I can't prohibit it. That's the sound of progress. The insulation, yes, is in the walls. We've got R19 24-inch bats running the whole way around, and we are insulated, boys and girls. We've also got R19 running around the finished room and R32 up in the ceilings in those 10-foot joists that Jake and I framed out just a few weeks ago. Now, we have not done anything with the ceiling yet because my electrician still needs to come in to run all the wiring for the lighting and some of the other accessory lighting that we're gonna be doing in the building, connecting back to the primary switches that are gonna be kind of scattered throughout. We got so many updates now that I'm looking around. Now, speaking of electric, my electrician did pop out and rough in the finished area. So we've actually got our mini split wire right here. A mini split is gonna go right up in this area. It's 12,000 BTU Bosch unit gonna be right there. That'll handle heating and cooling for this space. We've got some of our switches roughed in, which are going to be for the shop area. 2 switches to operate the roughly 18 to 20 lights that we're going to be putting up in here, 21,000 lumens each. We've got switches out front that are actually going to work the lights on the inside here. We've got our switches for the bathroom, 2 lights, pancake style lights, and then of course our bath fan. Receptacles, blah, 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 blah. That's all been rough wired in. So we should have power to this building hopefully by the end of the week real time. It's been kind of a challenge to get a hold of my power company to actually come out and hook up that line, being that it's already ran. Literally all they have to do is spend 5 minutes to open up the transformer box, connect the wires to each of the poles, close up the electric box, turn the power on, put a meter in the base, and call it a day. You'd think something so simple would be so easy, but it's really not. So don't judge a book by its cover. Once that's the case, we'll be able to hook up all of our wiring to the panel, get lighting and power in here, hopefully seal off the doors, which I think should be arriving later today, get those hung, and then we can create a somewhat controlled environment. We've got our 3 windows here that I actually have insulation in for the time being, just so that way when we get power and drywall in here, we can keep a relatively comfortable, low humid atmosphere for the drywall, because drywall and moisture don't go well together. We also ended up installing our water lines. I've got water fed in from the house with a shutoff valve there. We've got a few shark bite fittings in here feeding up to what is going to be the slop sink location over there. We've got our hots and our colds plumbed into the bathroom, and an on-demand electric water heater. This is going to heat water for that sink and that sink only. Then we've got our cold water line going up and across the building, insulated already. You can see it running right here. We've got a spigot over there, which is going to be the equipment and dirt bike and quad and UTV and whatever wash area for dirty things, because I'm actually not going to finish that side. And then we've got one up front here for the vehicles. Wow, okay, I'm probably missing some more things at this moment in time, but that at least gets you guys caught up as to where we are with everything that's been changing and is going to continue to change here over the next few days. Last but not least, we have not finished this segment of the ceiling because we wanted to get all of that tin on this wall, which as you can see is now essentially done. So we'll see how well they make out with the softening today, and if they're able to finish up, they're probably going to finish this section of the ceiling as well. So that being said, let's step into the finished space yet again, because there's a few things that we need to do to actually prepare for drywall. Well, you guys thought I was going to talk about work boots today without actually doing any work? Come on, you were mistaken. We've got to get a kick plate installed at the bottom base of our finished floor here for drywall. So let's get that in real quick. Alright, so now we've got all of what I'm going to call our toe plates in. That way there's a fastening backing for the drywall that's going to finish off the inside space. Now we are on to the next task of the day. So I've got both of my interior doors, and we need to get them up and hung nice and level and square before we start our drywall, just to make our lives a little bit easier. So we're going to start at the bathroom. Crowded in here and harder to navigate. Just kidding, my friends. We are not going to be installing doors today because I was somewhat fickle-minded in my Lowe's run the other day and I didn't buy the right depth door. Beginner's mistake? Yeah, we'll chalk it up to that. All right, guys, so I haven't really been filming all that much. I've just been running around basically preparing for the 8 massive concrete trucks that are all carrying 9 cubic yards of concrete each that are going to be arriving later in the week. We had to do some reorganization. I'm trying to keep the place as tidy as possible because a construction site can get out of hand really quick from what I've learned. And honestly, a messy construction site is a place where nothing at all gets done and it looks like garbage because there's a lot of it that accumulates. And as I was sitting here thinking, I actually kind of wanted to elaborate a little bit further as to why I didn't go with radiant floor from a financial perspective and from a preference perspective. Truthfully, if you're watching this video and you're on the fence about radiant floor versus an alternative method of heating, whether it's radiant tube style, propane or natural gas fired like I'm going with, whether it's forced air, electric baseboard, it seems like that's kind of an unpopular option option in this day and age from an efficiency perspective because it draws a lot of electrical energy to actually heat the building. Or if you're looking at some sort of a geothermal, I mean, there's a ton of options. Solar maybe to power something. I don't know, I guess it could get kind of fancy, but I didn't really look much further outside of the two primaries, and that's radiant tube style heating that's propane fired, and a propane fired hot water heater that was gonna run the pump for the radiant floor. Now, radiant floor, there's a lot of really awesome videos out on the interwebs that kind of detail that. Check out our buildings or Keeping Up with the Morgans, which is another fellow Pennsylvania YouTube channel, as a matter of fact. I'd actually fell back on those resources on YouTube for a while, and that's really kind of where I started to base my decision of, do I want to make the investment in radiant or do I not? And if I do, how do I go about doing it? Because I was going to do the installation for a cost avoidance as well. That's kind of why I built this whole building up into this point in time, because I've saved like nearly 50% of the cost, which seems astronomical, but it's very, very real savings. So my research started there, and then it expanded further into the network of people that I know that also have big and small pole buildings just like this, sheds, garages, call them what you will. Through having some detailed discussions with them about my state of being so torn, I was able to gather enough information to consciously make a decision for my interest and my needs and my finances that made total sense. I think the hype behind radiant floor is there, and I see why. It's a really slick setup. You got all the tubing in the floor. It's easy once it's installed, but it just costs a little bit more money. It's not necessarily heat that you feel, it's just a heat that emits gracefully through the pad. Once you get it up to warmth, which is just kind of a one-time fire up for the season, it's pretty simple. You keep it at a consistent temperature over time, so that way you don't have to warm up your entire network of water, and you're pretty much ready to rock and roll. Then what I decided to do was a radiant tube style heater. I mentioned it gets suspended up in the back. There's a small little blower motor with an igniter. It ignites the propane and it fills up a radiant tube, and then that will actually emit, through thermodynamics, heat into the objects, including yourself as an object, and it's heat that you can feel. Now, it will actually heat up the concrete pad, but it's not the same concept as radiant floor because it's so distributed, whereas radiant propane heat heats up all the objects in the shop itself, and the floor is essentially a boilerplate in a way. Now then, you gotta get a little bit further and you ask yourself, how hot do I actually wanna keep my shop? And when we're going, we work up a sweat big time. I don't want this place to be 75 degrees, nor do I want it to be 70 degrees. I'm looking at a consistent 60, and if we can achieve that throughout the entire winter, it's gonna feel absolutely incredible in here when it's like 3 degrees outside. All right, now from a cost perspective, I had to make a few decisions for variables of cost. We have somewhat of a thermal break on the outside of the pole building because we actually took a pressure treated 2x6, put it on the inside and the outside of the poles, and then poured in between it. As you guys can see right there, it's filled with concrete the whole way around the building. So that's essentially going to act as our thermal brakes for any expelling winds from the outside, gusts, what have you, that could actually leach cold into the pad, which would then reduce your energy efficiency. Now, am I building the most energy efficient building in the world? I'm not gonna say that I am, because if I was, I would have a whole bunch of foam down everywhere like we would do with radiant floor, but I personally chose to opt out of that. Now, I know a lot of people are probably gonna jump down into the comments and they're gonna say I'm making all these regretful decisions, this, that, and the other, but I've done enough research to this point in time that I can confidently say I'm happy with my decision, and when you go to build a building, whether it's 10 by 10 or 500 by 500, you can do as you please, because it's your choice. So the radiant tube style heater was about $2,000 versus if I went through, let's just say, a company online, I'm not gonna mention names because I got a specific quote and I want you guys to shop fairly if you're going to end up getting radiant floor, but it's pretty nice. They kind of make it turnkey. They send you out everything you need. I was looking at about $12,500 just for all the fittings, the piping, the manifold, and the boiler itself. That's just to get a system for radiant floor. Now that's not installed. Then you can make the choice of installing it yourself or paying somebody to install it, and you can guarantee that with the amount of labor that's involved to do one of those radiant floors, it's probably going to cost you an additional $4,000 to $6,000. I'm just ballparking because things typically come up, and labor these days is not cheap by any means. Now, on top of that, when you do radiant floor and you're depending on heat from the floor to radiate up into the building, you absolutely need to create a better thermal block of insulation below. And what you would do is actually get insulation like we have right there, that white stuff underneath my finished area. That stuff's called rigid foam. It's a 25 PSI thickness, so it's a very heavy duty grade. It's probably a little overkill for that, but that's all that was in stock at my local concrete supply warehouse. I did it over there because we're gonna be doing a different style of heat, which is essentially blown heat with my mini split. Now factoring that in, my mini split was $1,200 and it was about $500 to install. So in total for heating in this building, I'm at $3,500. Versus if we go back to the radiant floor discussion and I had to buy rigid foam for this entire garage, it was gonna be about $7,500. So now we're looking at a total sunken upfront cash cost of $20,000. Now I took a little bit of a different alternative approach to building this building. I think that if I was, let's just say, taking out a loan and doing it that way, $20,000 probably wouldn't have been all that big of a deal, and it probably would have eased up the ability to just simply factor it into the loan, right? A lot of people do that when they buy houses. But being that I was approaching this building from a little bit of a different perspective where I kind of budgeted for it for a while, it really necessarily wasn't something that I saw suit for my intentions of the building, for what I'm gonna be doing with the building, and based off the discussions I had with a lot of very influential people in my life. They're super happy with the radiant style tube heat, and I'm a pretty simple man. I'm coming from a pole building that has the bare minimum insulation and a torpedo heater with absolutely no insulation in the floor, no vapor barrier, no nothing at all, and no thermal block. And honestly, I was grateful just to be under that roof versus in my garage like I was a few years ago. So that's just my personal take on radiant floor versus radiant tube heater and alternative. If you guys want to go do more research on YouTube, I certainly encourage that you do so. It's a big decision and you guys got to just weigh your variables and make a choice for yourself, not so much what people are telling you to do, because at the end of the day, they're not the ones that are signing the checks. So we got some more deliveries today. Our exterior man doors finally arrived. That was a whole hold up in and of itself. The garage door situation's even worse, but we're trying to make do with the variables at play here. So we're gonna get to work here trying to get these doors hung, and that way we can finish those up and just keep checking boxes. All right, boys and girls, we are jumping all over the map today. I had to end up getting the scissor lift rental back to Eagle Rental out here in Lebanon before I got charged for another day. I gotta give a huge shout out to Dylan over there. He's been the man and the rep of the lift manufacturer. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I really apologize. He actually brought a gift over to Eagle Rental that then they gave to me, and it's a die-cast version of the scissor lift that we've been using to build the pole building. And although it might seem like a little gesture, man, it goes a long way, and that right there is the coolest part about YouTube, in my personal opinion. So huge shout out to the manufacturer, LGMG. Man, that thing is really cool, and I cannot wait to surprise my son with it. He is gonna freaking love it. That's where we're gonna wrap up this video, boys and girls. Thank you as always for watching. If you haven't already, tap that subscribe button. Thanks for tuning in with me for all the details that we covered in the pole building update today. Look forward to an extremely exciting episode coming up where we're gonna be getting that concrete floor poured, and then just a few more things before we start moving over some of our belongings. And man, that day is just so overdue.